Hello there, Professor. First time to Pendleton? It's as close as you can get to Nye County without actually having to step foot in it. You're going to be familiar with our victim, Manuel Molinas.
Drug dealer we just arrested for the murder of Jessica Marnier. He's connected to Beatrice Salazar. What's he doing in a Pendleton jail cell?
A few years back, feds decided they needed a facility to handle their more sensitive prisoner transfers in and out of the southwest United States. Someplace off the radar. Someplace like Pendleton. So they wrote a big check to the town council and upgraded their existing jailhouse in exchange for occasionally taking over the place. Our tax dollars at work.
I thought this building looked a little too metropolitan for a town of 35. Isn't that officer one of ours?
Yes, he is, but Sergeant Lip's been tapped before by the feds to coordinate this kind of transfer. Their plan was to quietly move Molinas out of our lockup and into this undisclosed location, then hold him here until he could be interviewed by a federal prosecutor and formally transferred into federal custody.
Not a bad plan. I wonder what went wrong.
Looks like everything. Okay, I don't need to tell you. This is now priority number one. Molinas' transfer was on a need-to-know basis. The first I heard of it, the sheriff and the deputy director of the FBI had me on the speakerphone, screaming that somebody dropped the ball. So I got my ass out of there and secured the scene.
Is Agent Huntby still missing?
Yes. And based on his apparent effort to sabotage your handling of the DNA evidence in the Salazar case, the FBI strongly suspects he was a mole for Salazar, and now officially considers his disappearance UFAP.
Unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, meaning he's a fugitive, and very likely a suspect in this homicide. Sergeant Lip should consider himself a very lucky man. Whoever broke in here to silence Molinas wouldn't have wanted to leave a living witness. We'll need to get a full statement from him. Looks like a small caliber automatic. A 22, maybe a 25. From what I've observed of the victim's wounds, this could be our murder weapon, but I'm letting myself get ahead of the evidence, aren't I? Let's see what Doc Robbins has to tell us at autopsy. It's blood. It's a fragment of some kind. It looks like it got wedged in the slide. Whatever it is, it's underneath the blood, which means it was there before the blood was. I don't think that will get you what you want. Yellow powder. We'll want to get that back to the lab. The cell was locked during the shooting. We don't know exactly where the shooter was standing as he fired, but that powder might indicate his position. The keys are in the lock. Our shooter might have unlocked it, but he didn't need to open the cell door in order to shoot Molinas. This digital recorder stored all the footage from the security cameras in the station. The hard drive's been crushed. We might be able to put it back together at the lab, but it'll probably take weeks to do that, plus salvage any data on it, and that's if we're lucky. I think we might learn more by just putting the case back together. Certainly be a better use of our time.
Hey.
Sergeant Lip, I'm Ray Langston. My partner and I are with the Las Vegas Crime Lab.
Yeah, great. But please, call me Tim. This is just a spectacular screw-up. Mr. Molines was here awaiting his interview and formal transfer into federal custody. I'd say approximately an hour before the federal authorities were scheduled to arrive, around maybe 8 p.m. or thereabouts, this tall, and if I remember correctly, Hispanic male, wearing a suit, he enters the facility and presents FBI credentials. I turned around to reach for the paperwork, and bam! That's the last thing I remember. I woke up behind the desk here, and then I went to check on the condition of the prisoner. I observed that he'd been shot multiple times, and that he was dead.
What did you do next?
I called it in, tended to my head injury as best I could, and just waited for you guys to show up.
You didn't observe any further sign of the shooter, or whether he had an accomplice?
I didn't see anything. He was long gone, or they were gone. I don't know if he had help. Unfortunately, the assailant disabled our surveillance. He smashed the recording unit to pieces, what's left of that DVR over there. I don't remember the name on the identification. I'm sorry. I thought I got a really good look at it, too, because I didn't recognize it, fella, but it's all real foggy to me right now.
I understand that this kind of prisoner transfer is on a need-to-know basis, but is it standard operating procedure to post a single guard?
No, it isn't. But in this case, it was necessary because, well, you might find this a little hard to believe, but our budget's been cut pretty radically, so the truth is, we couldn't afford to assign an additional officer. We were definitely whistling through the graveyard, I know that now, hoping we could get away with this one, but we were wrong.
Who made the final decision that you alone would transport and protect Mr. Molines?
I did, actually. The sheriff ordered the prisoner transfer, but I'm the sergeant in charge of operational command. That means duty assignments, tactical protocols, and budget outlays. I was the one who evaluated our risk assessment on this one, and I was wrong. Dead wrong.
We all make mistakes, Tim.
Yeah. Only this mistake cost a man his life, Mr. Langston. Nope. After I regained consciousness, I opened up the cell in order to check on the condition of the prisoner. And that's when I observed the multiple bullet wounds to Mr. Molines, and I quickly determined that he had died of those wounds. When federal authorities need the building, the sheriff and his deputy actually work out of his house. Can you believe that? There's just not much crime here in Pendleton. Not much of anything here, really. From what I remember, he was tall, approximately 6'1", Hispanic male, between 200 and 225 pounds, clean cut. I mean, I don't think he would have caught me off guard if he hadn't looked like a federal prosecutor or FBI agent.
That's a pretty serious head wound you have there, Tim. Looks like you lost quite a bit of blood. You might want to get that looked at right away.
You know, it must look a lot worse than it feels right now. Honestly, I feel okay. And if you don't mind, I'd like to stay here as long as you might need me. No, I didn't. Whatever it was, knocked me out in one hit. Hey, let me know if you find something, okay? Maybe you guys can help save my job.
We'll do our best, Tim. Now, if you don't mind, I'm also a doctor, so I'd like to take a look at your head wound there.
Yeah, okay.
Good news here is you're going to live, but you're going to need stitches. So now that you've given us your statement, Tim, I am not taking no for an answer. We're going to get you to the hospital.
Okay, I understand. Thanks, Doc.
Well done. I believe we have enough evidence here to begin processing at the lab. It's your call. That's the rag Sergeant Lip applied to his head to staunch the bleeding. Since he left it for us, I'm sure Sergeant Lip wouldn't mind if we processed a sample of his DNA. I'll call the coroner to pick up the body. We need to get a reference sample of the ammunition fired by this pistol to compare against the slugs found in the victim. This pistol fires .22 caliber long rifle cartridges. Unfortunately, not a particularly unique type of ammunition. But it's a favorite among amateur hunters as well as professional assassins. Looks like there's a small piece of it missing. You know that shard we found wedged in the gun at the crime scene? I think it just might fit in this gap. Let's try it. Yes, a perfect fit. pollen of the southwestern wood lily. This flower is native to Nevada, but it's rare. Blood on the gun here is Sergeant Lip's, which means it was definitely used to strike him in the head.
Ray, where are we now with the Molina's case? I read Sergeant Lip's statement.
Well, Sergeant Lip isn't telling us the whole truth.
How do you know?
We recovered a gun at the crime scene, and wedged in the slide, we found a broken piece of the unit which records all the surveillance footage. Now, not only was that shard stuck in the gun, but it was also underneath some blood. Blood which turns out to belong to our very own Sergeant Lip. It means that little piece of plastic was in there before Sergeant Lip was struck in the head.
But according to Sergeant Lip, the assailant entered, presented him with ID, and then when this sergeant turned his back, the assailant knocked him out. You think he would have noticed the assailant smashing up surveillance equipment before he got knocked out?
You'd think so. You'd also think Sergeant Lip wouldn't turn his back on a guy like that maybe he'd even draw his own weapon. But for some reason, that's not how it went down.
Hello there, it's Doc Robbins down in the morgue. I've finished the autopsy on Manuel Molina's. So whenever you're ready, I'm available to review my findings with you. Nice to see you. How can I help? I found 2 bullet wounds, both potentially fatal, and both were consistent with the damage you'd expect from a small caliber hollow point. One bullet penetrated his heart practically dead center. It severed the pulmonary and aortic valves and lodged in the ventricular wall. That alone would have killed him. However, I also found what I believe was the first shot. It penetrated the frontal bone of his cranium just above the glabella. Bullet obliterated his brain tissue in an expanding channel from the entrance wound. It then bounced off the back of his skull and continued its path of destruction until it came to rest in the cerebellum. Death was quick, if not painless.
Well, this wasn't a mercy killing. One to the head, one to the heart, usually suggests a professional killer.
Neither slug was particularly difficult to extract. Here they are. Absolutely. I have a sample ready for you. Here. I found a glob of what looks like mucus on the victim's face. I collected some for you.
Someone spat on his face?
That's what it looks like. You see, the less viscous bits appeared to flow down the side of his face, so unless he was already lying on the floor when he was shot, It occurred post-mortem. Anytime.
It's confirmed. The gun from the crime scene is the murder weapon. Both bullets taken from the victim were fired from the same gun. Beatrice Salazar. She spat on Molina's corpse. I wonder if that was a message for him or for us. Catherine, you need to see this.
Is this right? You found Beatrice Salazar's DNA in the cell.
She shot Molina's and spat on his face.
Well, she wasn't about to have him try to testify against her, that's for sure. But why would she risk trying to kill him herself? That doesn't make sense. Unless, of course, she also held him responsible for having to kill her own son.
But even under normal circumstances, this would have been a suicide mission. Not a lot of guys are crazy enough to do something like that. Even the ones that work for her.
I think she's crazy enough now to do just about anything.
Well, that may be true, but maybe she wasn't taking as much of a risk as we think. Sergeant Lip described the assailant as a tall Hispanic male posing as an FBI agent. What do you really think the chances are that Beatrice Salazar has become a master of disguise?
I think we need to be very careful if you're suggesting Sergeant Lip may be involved here. I realize we have evidence that contradicts the sergeant's initial statement, but if we're going to pursue this, then we better make damn sure our evidence is unimpeachable. Keep me in the loop, Ray.
Jim, we've uncovered evidence which substantially contradicts Sergeant Lip's account of the shooting.
What evidence? What are you talking about? The guy was viciously attacked. His skull was almost busted in. I mean, it's not like he's gonna have some photographic memory of exactly what happened. I don't see how that's relevant. Beatrice Salazar? Oh my God. Look, we'll bring in Sergeant Lip to answer some more questions. But I know how these things have a way of going down, Ray. And I don't want us to throw a good cop under the bus just because this department needs a scapegoat.
What's going on here, Captain?
Just a few follow-up questions, Tim. We just need to document everything for the record.
No, like I said, tall, Hispanic male, wearing a business suit, approached me. He showed me an FBI badge, an ID. Look, do you need me to sit with a sketch artist? I can do that if it'll help.
We found Beatrice Salazar's DNA on Manuel Molinez's corpse.
Beatrice Salazar? What are you talking about?
Are you familiar with Beatrice Salazar?
I'm familiar with the FBI's most wanted list.
Tim, according to your statement, the assailant entered the jail, offered you an FBI ID, and when you turned around to process it, he struck you over the back of the head, rendering you unconscious. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. It went down pretty fast.
You see this little piece of plastic? It comes from that unit which records all the footage from the surveillance cameras. We found it stuck inside the slide of the gun that struck you. Problem is, we found your blood on top of it. Not underneath, as you'd expect, if your statement were accurate. It looks as though the DVR was struck before you were.
I don't know how that could have happened. Wait, couldn't he have hit me more than once, like after I was out?
If you were struck more than once, we should be able to tell from the pattern of the bruising.
I don't know about that. I've had about enough of people touching my head today.
Sergeant Lip, let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be. If necessary, I'll get a warrant.
Damn it. Okay, do what you have to do.
This won't hurt at all. My partner just needs to take a picture. And that's it. Like I said, painless.
Yeah, thanks.
I only see evidence of a single wound. The bruising on Sergeant Lip's head is a perfect match to the shape of the murder weapon. That little divot there is right where the DVR shard was, and those ovals are consistent with the finger placement of someone holding the gun by the grip. There's something strange about the angle, though. The gun was upside down. To strike someone with a gun while you're holding it by the grip, you're either hitting with the butt, like a hammer, or with the side of the gun like you're swinging a haymaker punch or slapping someone. If Sergeant Lip was struck from behind, like he says he was, then the gun would be right side up. Sergeant Lip did this to himself.
That's right. I had my back turned, and he hit me in the back of the head.
Here's the problem, Tim. You see those oval patterns right there? They indicate the gun that hit you was held by the grip. And if you were hit from behind, like you said, well, then the gun should be right side up. And it's not.
Yeah, sure, the first time he hit me, but what about after I was out? He could have hit me again, right? Maybe he wasn't just trying to knock me out. He may have been trying to kill me.
There's no physical evidence you were hit more than once, Tim. And let's say for the sake of argument, you were hit twice. Right on the exact same spot on the back of your head. It still doesn't explain why the gun was upside down.
You staged your injury, didn't you, Sergeant? You're in Salazar's pocket. And you used your position as duty sergeant to arrange to be alone with Molina's. Then you let Salazar in there. And let's be generous here. Let's just say she's the one who actually pulled the trigger. And then the good little soldier you are, you cleaned up after her, didn't you? You make me sick. And you know what? I hope there's a special place in hell for dirt like you, because I know there's a special place in prison.
It wasn't like that. I mean, look, you gotta understand, I'm in way over my head here. You're right. It was a setup. After Molina's was booked, I got a call. Same call I always got, if Salazar needed something from me. This time, the voice on the other end of the line is telling me to keep my eye on Molina's. Turns out I don't need to look very hard, because the sheriff calls me almost immediately with the order to have Molina's moved out to Pendleton and transferred to federal custody. So I call my contact back, give him the tip. Then he starts asking me to describe the Pendleton facility and the security detail handling the transfer, and that's when I realize Salazar's going to take Molina's out. I decide to assign myself the transfer just so nobody else gets hurt.
How very noble of you, Tim.
Look, I'm not proud of what I did. This is all way beyond anything I've had to do for Salazar before. Usually it's just about providing certain information now and then.